So I've saved my file. I have not saved my file to the desktop, but into the storage folder so I won't lose it. Reminder, don't let me ever save to the desktop again, please. Now I'm going to import some artwork, and it's one of the files you were asked to download. And on this file, it is this graphic. Now, what this graphic will allow us to do is to draw or paint on top of it. And we're going to create artwork for a walking cycle. Now, the key thing to notice on the walking cycle is this, as you look here, is exactly half of the walking cycle. You can see with the arms, or just with the legs really, and even the arms, color-coded. You can follow the dark body part as it moves from back to front. The light one from the front moves to the back. So really this is half of a walking cycle that once you have that part done, if you want to create the full loop of both legs, so it creates a continuous loop, then you can duplicate the frames and do some coloring, and it works itself out quite nicely that way. Or you can just continue drawing. So to do this, I'm going to take this layer, lock it, and I am going to convert it to a guide layer so I don't have to worry about, I don't have to delete it or anything else later. I can just make it a guide layer. Now I can add in a new layer, and this is the layer where I'm going to start drawing my artwork. Now as I choose to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, and then I will add a new keyframe and draw, new keyframe and draw. So I can work it that way. Or I could draw the first 5 positions of my walk cycle and then start copy pasting those onto new frames and then work on lining them up. And there's really not a lot of it will be personal preference at that point. It's not going to be based on hard and fast, you must do it one way or another way. So after I've made a decision of what I'm going to do, grab my paintbrush, and now I can choose some color or colors to work with. And today I am going to work with green, kind of a blue-green sort of color, and I can use that. Now, while I'm trying to do this, especially if this is your first time doing a walking character where you're trying to build that walk animation, my advice is let's use this image as a tracing image. We're going to trace over it, rearrange the pieces, turn it into an animated loop, and start to understand how we can use that. And then armed with that knowledge, you'll be able to recreate this kind of sequence for any character of your choosing. Later on this evening, we will look at making the character walk using a series of symbols instead of hand drawing the pieces on each and every frame. But first, let's try and do it this way, because this is a very traditional exercise that once you get the hang of it, you should, if you like doing frame-by-frame animation, you should really work on practicing your drawing cycle or drawing walk cycles by hand without reference over and over until you get the hang of it and get a convincing looking character walking where they appear to have mass and weight. Because what you don't want is you don't want a character that just appears to float across the screen. This is something, if you watch a lot of bad animation, you'll notice the characters appear to have no mass or weight and are moving in a zero gravity environment. Because when they walk, their legs move, but they don't seem to be affected by any force of gravity. Notice here how the torso, as well as the head, moves up and down based on the positions of the legs. That's what's really important when conveying that motion or movement in the walking cycle. So starting with this, I'm going to just draw and create my character. And what I really care about is creating that body, creating the head, and noticing the positions of the legs. Now what I may choose to do is to go back over this with a second color so I can see the front leg and back leg and the front arm and back arm and understand the differences of those. But when I start out first, I'm going to just put this in with this. So we can see you have a basic body shape. Now, the next thing that I can do, and I find that it's a little bit challenging if I try, because the feet, unless I'm really precise or accurate with my drawing, tracing this, the hands and feet will often start to overlap each other. So at this point, I like to then use an empty keyframe. So I hit F7 for the empty keyframe. If I want to see my previous drawing at least a little bit, I can always turn on onion skinning so I can get a sense that what I'm doing. Now, what's important is noticing how the head has gotten lower. The torso has gotten lower. We can see there's a line for the crotch, a line for the top of the head, using those as guidelines, seen as you're going up and down with the step. The foot now making contact with the ground. The back leg bending. And if I were to draw the arms would be starting to cover up or overlap the body. So for now, I'm going to work on the legs, torso, and head, and then work on starting to add back in the arms after I get this part of it figured out. Now you can see how the leg gets straight. As the body gets tall, the head starts to go up. Then you can just hit F7 again. And what's really going to be fun about this is once you get your pieces in place, and then you start lining them up and taking a look at how it all works, it's like magic. If I turn off onion skinning, turn off the back layer, I can see with the color I've chosen I need to modify my stage so we can see it a little bit better. But we'll see that my character appears to walk when I scrub the timeline. So it's the starting of basic animation. Now with this, the next frames are really going to be just redrawing this, but flipping front and back legs. Now I drew this just with one color. Now I'm going to go in and create a second color, but I'm going to add my colors to my guide layer. So I have my main color, and then I'm going to have a different color for my darker color. Now knowing that, I can now just add some of that darker color in. And if you remember the keyboard shortcut for advancing frames, if you don't want to click and drag, let me turn that off. I forgot to, and I think I just colored on the wrong layer because I forgot to lock that one. So let me try again on the correct layer. Color the leg, color the arm. Advance frames with period and comma to go back and forth. So if I test the movie, we'll see he's going really, really fast. And I could slow this down or add in extra frames. What I'm going to do temporarily is just knock this down to 12 frames per second so it moves at a little better clip. But it's still going a little bit fast, so we might need to do some modifications to it. So now I'm just going to add in the rest of the arms. I'm going to figure out what else I need. I need to switch to the front arm color. Put in the front arm. Now I'll grab the back color for the arm. So it looks like that might be extending a little. That shoulder wouldn't show. So now I am starting to get a walking character. And after I have completed the initial 5 drawings, the next step for continuing those drawings is to repeat these, but then flip-flopping what was the front and back. So currently I had this as my back leg right here when it started, and because that ended up front, now my next drawing is going to be like this, except then I flip the front and back legs. So I can hit F7 once more, and now this is going to be my back leg, and I can switch to the other. So I have head, body coming down, making sure it's below the line, and then that front leg color is bending as I go down. F7 once more, and this time that leg is in front of the back leg, which is now starting to push the body up. And I'll go back and add the other one in a moment. And now this time the front leg here, the body is going up. And the next frame that I would want would actually be the very first frame that we left off on. So now I need to add in leg, add in a leg, so we now can see the character starting to walk. And the next step after this, and I can go back and add in the arms, but the next step is to start to position these pieces of artwork, these characters. Now, the flip-flopping when you're drawing the front leg or the back leg gets a little bit confusing mentally as you're like, shoot, which one am I trying to do? So that can sometimes cause a little bit of difficulty, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. So once I have this, then what I want to actually do is I want to start putting my character so that every one of these drawings is effectively in the same place. So it's like he's walking on a treadmill, because that's going to give me something that's usable. So that's the next phase. So the key thing really is getting your character so your character is going up and down. So you get this flow so that the head is going up and down, so the body is going up and down. So you're getting this movement, this organic flowing up and down. This is what starts to add movement, mass, weight to your characters when they try to animate. Even if you animate with symbols and you start moving around parts that can't deform or change their length or shape, if you follow these principles, you're going to get much better looking characters. Otherwise, they will look like Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk, where he appears to move without going up or down. That's part of how he creates that illusion of no gravity, because his body remains at a consistent height. Now that I have this in place, I'm going to turn off my guide layer so I can just see my character. At this point, what I really need to do is I need to start lining up my characters with each other, so I create the illusion of the character walking in place. So if I advance, now I turn on onion skinning, and if I advance my character, I can now select it, and I can start to line it up. Now, part of what's going to happen with this, and we'll look at this in a couple of different ways, and I'll see how if I keep lining up the foot, the character will travel the distance of one step. Ultimately, if I want to turn this into a more usable animation, it's better to almost have my character walking on a treadmill, because then I can animate that. But I'll first start with it this way. So I'm just advancing frames and moving it over. And I need to adjust that because I don't want to see in front. And this hopefully will help to show how the character is actually bobbing up and down as part of the walking motion. While I'm trying to line this up, it can be useful to use the arrow keys to move the artwork, because it sometimes is a little bit easier than trying to do it just through grabbing and moving, because it snaps at times that you'll find inopportune. So now if I scrub through, I'll see I really have my character walking. And if I let the movie play, we'll see that he is indeed walking on screen. Now, this animation, as is, I could take this collection of frames and copy them into a movie clip, and then I could animate this movie clip to my heart's content. So what I'm going to do so that I can fit more than one version of this guy on screen is I'm going to do what's called edit multiple frames. And when I turn that on, I can actually see all of the frames. It actually starts to look similar to what you see excuse me, in the handout, where you see the different versions. If I'd colored them all differently, it would look very similar. But now that I've done that, I can select the whole grouping and move it up. So then that allows me to do it very easily. I can move the whole of my animation. Now, knowing that, I'm going to highlight some frames and then right-click on the frames, scroll down and choose Copy Frames. Insert New Symbol. I'm going to do a movie clip. Call it Walking. And scroll down and paste frames. That puts the frames in. We can see there's the character walking. Now, if I'm bothered by the registration point down here, I could use the same trick of edit multiple frames and move it down, but it doesn't really matter too much for what we're doing. We can now go and pull the character down, and we can see there that character is. But I don't want it on that layer, so I'm going to undo that. Forgot I wanted a new layer. I'll now put my walking character on this layer. Now if I test my movie, we should see two identical characters walking. If I extend that out, say to 32 frames, test it, we'll see that that keeps walking. Now I'm going to speed this up just a touch. I slowed it way down to 6 because it seemed like he was walking too fast, and that seems to be a little bit, with the bounce in a step, I kind of like him moving at that pace. But if I tween this, I'm guessing that's about as much, needs to move about 4 times as much to get over here. Now if we look, we can see and if I do this, you'll notice something's going on here. It's a little awkward. You notice how he's almost stuttering in his walk? And that's because as he travels, if I wanted to precisely use this animation and be able to have it a repeating loop to tween it to move it across the stage, because in doing so, I could say move it up to here and then perform a scale change on it. So it appears that he's now walking off into the distance, but the problem is that stuttering as he crosses horizontal ground. So this is why I really need to create a version of him on a treadmill, which I'm just going to let him go here so he seems to walk and shrink. He's going in the fun house where he's appearing to shrink down. So I want him to move more on a treadmill. So I'm going to take this existing walking and I'm going to duplicate it so we have a version to look at. We'll call it, I'm calling it walking a line. Now you don't have to go through all these different steps, but I'm doing it as, you know, to try and help you understand what really needs to happen with this. So what needs to happen is he needs to stay in place and not move. So I'm going to turn on onion skinning so I can see what's here. So now I need to select it and move him. So he needs to, instead of going back and forth, what needs to happen is he pretty much just needs to bob up and down. And this is what's going to give me the kind of effect that I need. Turn off onion skinning and let's see. You can even just turn on loop and then just hit play. And now it looks like he's pretty much in place walking on a treadmill. So this can be a good way of, you just turn on loop and hit play and then you can now see he's moving. Just to satisfy my need for having things aligned here, I'm actually going to take the whole thing and just align it. That has no bearing on performance or anything else. It just makes me feel happier about the whole situation. And sometimes it's about satisfying needs for being anal-retentive on certain characteristics within the program. All right. So now that was, this is the misaligned. And this layer over here is the original. I'm going to save all of this hard work. Now I can go and add a new layer. And I will pull out the walking character. And now this time, I create motion tween with it. If I put it over here. Now as you can see, these are movie clips, so when I scrub the animation, we don't get to see it move. Even though it is a movie clip, it is possible if I need to see that animation, I can say, treat it like a graphic temporarily, and then I can actually start to see. And now I'm starting to get the sense he might be walking too fast for the little distance he's covering, so that might not be the deal, but we can look. Not too bad. But notice how he doesn't have that stuttering effect anymore. So I've now created a much more useful item. I'm going to set this back to movie clip so I can actually modify a few things so it's easier to see. I'll just make this one become red. We'll make this one we'll make this one become yellow. So now we can see the differences. And if I wanted this one to shrink down as well, I could certainly shrink it. And but the nice part is, if I want to build this animation, we can see now, I now have an animation of a guy walking where I only had to draw 8 frames, and I'm actually able to use it for 60 as it moves across the stage. So it's a useful technique of combining frame by frame animation with motion tweening, and then I didn't have to draw all 60 frames of my character looping a repetitive activity across the stage. There we go. That was weird. Apparently when the SWF is up, I can't hit Command period to pause the recording because it made weirdness happen. This makes sense? Sort of? This is why you're trying to do it. So if you have not aligned your animation to make it more useful, why don't you do so now? And we'll listen to a little